Okay, so the first problem is a nurse is preparing to administer a drug 8 milligrams IM. The amount available for injection is 2 milligrams per 1 milliliter. How many ml should the nurse administer? Okay, so step 1 is going to be read the question. What is the question asking? I want you to circle it. So it's asking how many ml should the nurse administer? Second, identify any distractors. There's no distractors because we will be using all this information that they give us. So we have 8 milligrams on hand. That's what we're preparing to administer. That's going to be times the conversion factor that is available. So it's 2 milligrams for every 1 milliliter. So we're going to put the milligrams on the bottom and the milliliters up top because those units will cancel each other out. The only thing we're left with will be 1 ml up top. So 8 times 1 divided by 2 is 4 mLs. Using your rounding rules, it says to the nearest whole number, and that is the whole number. So it will be 4 mLs. Okay, so the second question is, a nurse is preparing to administer a drug 35 milligrams by mouth to a patient who has schizophrenia. Available on hand is 5 milligrams per tablet. How many tablets should the nurse plan to administer? Okay, so step 1, read the question. What is it asking? It's asking how many tablets should the nurse administer? So I want you to circle that so you won't forget. You can look back. Identify any distractors, and there's no distractors because we will use all of the information that they give us. So we're planning to administer 35 mgs, and the available is 5 milligrams per tablet. So now you can set up your conversion. There's 35 mgs times the factor of 5 milligrams per every 1 tablet. You put the milligrams on the bottom and the tablets up top because the milligrams cancel each other out. The only thing you'll be left with is tablets, and the question is asking you how many tablets. So 35 times 1 divided by 5, and that gives you 7 tablets. Using your rounding rules, you're left with a whole number. A patient weighs 196 pounds and is ordered a drug, 12.5 milligrams per kilogram per dose every 6 hours for 10 days. The drug is available in 10 and 20 milliliter vials containing 50 milligrams per milliliter. How many milligrams will the patient receive each day? So step 1 is read the question. Circle what it's asking. It's asking how many milligrams is the patient receiving each day. Step 2 is identify the distractors. Okay, so the question is asking how many milligrams is the patient receiving. So we would not use 10 and 20 milliliter vials because the question is not asking how many vials. We also will not be using 50 milligrams per 1 milliliter because the question is not asking how many milliliters will you be administering. So the only thing that we are going to be using is the weight and how many doses they're receiving every day. So put a box around that. I like to call that the hub. They're receiving it every 6 hours for 10 days. But the question is only asking how much are they receiving each day. So 10 days is also a distractor. So step 3, we need to do our conversions. So we know we're going to be using weight for this equation. We need to convert pounds to kilograms first. So there's 196 pounds, and we need to convert that to kilograms. So we'll set up our conversion. So there's 2.2 pounds in every kilogram. Make sure your units line up and they cancel each other out. Your desired unit should always be on top, whatever you're left with. So it's 196 times 1 divided by 2.2. And that gives you 89.0909. And that would be in kilograms. Make sure you put your units in the back of all your numbers to know where they belong. And that number represents the total weight of your patient. So you're going to multiply the total weight of your patient by the milligrams. So it would be 89.090909 times 12.5 milligrams, because there's 12.5 milligrams for every 1 kilogram of weight. So once you do that, you will get 1,113.6363 milligrams. And that number represents the total amount of milligrams for the total amount of weight that your patient is. So you can go up back to your problem and you can cross 12.5 milligrams per kilogram out. So we know that there is 1,113.6363 milligrams per dose that they will receive, because that is the only unit left in our hub. We're going to multiply that by the amount of doses that they're receiving every day. If you look back at your problem, it says that they receive it every 6 hours. So there's 24 hours in a day divided by 6 hours. That will give you the amount of doses they're going to receive throughout the day, which is 4 doses every day. So you're going to multiply the total amount of milligrams by the total amount of doses received each day. And this is because they're asking for the total amount of milligrams that the patient will receive each day. And you will get 4,455 milligrams. Step 4 is use your rounding rules. It's in whole numbers, so that will be your final answer. £97 child is ordered medication, 50 milligrams per kilogram per day. The child receives medication every 12 hours. The medication is available in 250 milliliter bottles containing 150 milligrams per 5 milliliters. How many mLs will you administer per dose? Okay, so step 1, it's asking how many mLs will you administer per dose. So make sure you circle that so you can refer back to what the question is asking. So step 2, identify any distractors. One distractor is 250 milliliter bottles. They're not asking how many bottles will you use, they're asking how many mLs will you administer per dose. So that is a distractor. We are going to put a box around our hub because this is where you're going to receive all your information. The child receives it every 12 hours. We will use that because we need to know how many doses are they receiving. And 150 milligrams for every 5 milliliters. We need that because we need to convert the milligrams to milliliters. So the child is 97 pounds. We need to get that to kilograms because we need to know how many kilograms we're multiplying by the amount of milligrams. So that gives us 44.0909 kilograms. And that represents the total weight in kilograms the patient is. Now that we have the total weight of the patient, we need to multiply it by the 50 milligrams because there's 50 milligrams per 1 kilogram of weight. So it would be 44.0909 kilograms times 50 milligrams. And that will give you 2,204.5454 milligrams. And that is for the total amount of milligrams for the total amount of weight. So now step 3, we can set up our conversion. We have 2,204.5454 milligrams per day. Because if you look up at the hub, we've used our milligrams and we've converted them to the total amount of milligrams. So the only thing we're left with is per day. So we have the total amount of milligrams for the total weight of the patient per day. Now, that's going to be times the conversion that's already given to us. That's the available. So there is 150 milligrams for every 5 milliliters of medication. 150 milligrams will go on the bottom because they will cancel each other out. So make sure you cancel them out. And the only thing we're left with is milliliters. So it will be 2,204.5454 times 5 divided by 150. That gives us 73.4848 milliliters. Now the question is asking us how much per dose. The child's receiving the medication every 12 hours. So to get the amount of doses, we need to do 24 hours divided by 12. So the child's receiving 2 doses. So now you take your total amount of mLs and you're going to divide that by the 2 doses. And that gives us 36.74 mLs per dose. Now step 4, very important, use your rounding rules. Go to the nearest 10, so that'll be 36.7 mLs per dose. A nurse is preparing to administer a drug 240 micrograms per kilogram per day IM in 3 divided doses to a client who weighs 160 kilograms. The amount available is 40 milligrams for every 1 Milliliter, how many ml should the nurse prepare per dose? Okay, so step 1, read what the question is asking. They're asking how many milliliters per dose. So circle them. And now we're going to put a box around our hub. 240 micrograms for every 1 kilogram per day. It's broken up into 3 doses, and the available is 40 milligrams per 1 milliliter. So we're going to multiply 160 kilograms by 240 micrograms because there's 240 micrograms for every 1 kilogram. And that gives us 38,400 micrograms. And that's the total micrograms, the total amount of drug for the total weight of the patient. Now that we got that, we can set up our conversion. So there is 38,400 micrograms for every day that the patient will receive the medication. And that's going to be times the factor of 1 milligram for every 1,000 micrograms. Since we need those units to cancel out, we can't go straight to milligrams. We need to convert the micrograms to milligrams first to use the next conversion. So your micrograms now cancel each other out, and what we're left with is milligrams. Now we can continue our conversion. So for the next conversion, we use the available dose, which is 40 milligrams for every 1 milliliter. Same as before, the units cancel each other out, and the only thing we're left with is milliliters. And that's what the question is asking, how many milliliters? And that leaves us with 0.96 milliliters per day. Now that we got the milliliters per day, we need to know how many milliliters per dose are we going to be administering. So we take our 0.96 milliliters and we're going to divide it by 3 doses because the question is asking how many milliliters per dose. They receive 3 doses in a day, and that will give us 0.32 milliliters per dose. The last step is to read your rounding rules, and it says round to the nearest tenth. So that will be 0.3 milliliters per dose, and that's your final answer. A nurse is preparing to administer a drug 5 milligrams per kilogram per day, IV divided into 2 equal doses to a client who weighs 183 pounds. Available is 6 milligrams per 1 milliliter. How many ml should the nurse prepare to administer per dose? Okay, so step 1, read the question. What is it asking? It's asking how many mLs should the nurse administer per dose. So put a big fat circle around them. Our hub is 5 milligrams per kilogram per day. That's where we're getting all our information. It's divided into 2 equal doses, and the patient weighs 138 pounds. The available is 65 milligrams per 1 milliliter. Okay, so the patient is 183 pounds. We need to convert that to kilograms. So you would take 183 times the conversion factor of 2.2 pounds under 1 kilogram. The units cancel out, and that gives us 83.1818 kilograms. So that's the total weight of the patient. We're going to multiply 83.1818 kilograms by 5 milligrams because there's 5 milligrams per 1 kilogram of weight. And that gives us 415.9090 milligrams. And that represents the total amount of milligrams for the total weight of the patient. So now we can set up our conversion. 115.9090 milligrams per day is going to be multiplied by the available on-hand dose. So that's 65 milligrams for every 1 milliliter. So you put your 65 on the bottom and your 1 milliliter up top, and make sure your units cancel out. The unit that you desire will be up top. So that gives you 6.398 milliliters per day. So now we're trying to find how many milliliters are in each dose. So you're going to take your 6.398 milliliters and you're going to divide that by 2 because they're receiving 2 equal doses every day. And that will give you 3.199 milliliters. Now look at your rounding rules and it says round to the nearest tenth. So that'll be 3.2 milliliters per dose. And that's your final answer. A nurse is preparing to administer a drug 6 micrograms per kilogram per day IV in 3 divided doses to a client who weighs 70 kilograms. The amount available is 50 micrograms per milliliter. How many ml should the nurse administer daily? Okay, so step 1, read what the question is asking. They're asking how many mLs will you administer per day? So our hub is 6 micrograms per kilogram per day. And we're going to use 3 doses. The patient weighs 70 kilograms and the available is 50 micrograms for every 1 milliliter. Okay, so we're going to multiply 70 kilograms by 6 micrograms. And that's going to give us the total amount of micrograms for the total amount of weight of the patient. So that's going to be 420 micrograms. We can go back up to our hub and cross micrograms and kilograms out because we have used them already. We've converted them. So there are 420 micrograms per day. And that's going to be times the conversion of micrograms to milliliters. So there's 50 micrograms for every 1 ml. Make sure your units cancel each other out, which they do, and the only thing we're left with is mLs. So it's going to be 420 times 1 divided by 50, which gives us 8.4 mLs per day. So the next problem is going to be a repeat, but with a different outcome. A nurse is preparing to administer a drug 6 micrograms per kilogram per day IV in 3 divided doses to a client who weighs 70 kilograms. The amount available is 50 micrograms per 1 milliliter. How many ml should the nurse administer per dose? Okay, so step 1. What are they asking? They're asking how many mLs will the nurse administer per dose? So set your hub up. It's going to be 6 micrograms for every kilogram for every day. 3 divided doses. We're going to use the available on hand because they're asking how many mLs. And we're going to use the weight of the patient. So it's going to be 70 kilograms times 6 micrograms because there's 6 micrograms per kilogram of weight. And that gives us 420 micrograms per day. Okay, so we can cross our 6 micrograms per kilogram out of our hub because we used it. Now we're only left with per day. So there's 420 micrograms per day. Now we can set up our conversion. That's going to be times the conversion of the available dose that they already give us. So we know it's going to be 50 micrograms per 1 ml. So 50 is going to go on the bottom and 1 ml is going to go up top because those units of micrograms are going to cancel each other out and we're only going to be left with mLs. So that gives us 8.4 mLs per day. The question is asking how many mL should the nurse administer per dose. So if the patient is receiving 3 doses, we need to divide the amount of mLs by the amount of doses received each day. So it's going to be 8.4 mLs divided by 3 doses. And that's going to give us 2.8 milliliters per dose. And that's our final answer.